This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast. This episode is brought to you by our friends over at America's Christian Credit Union. This year, they're celebrating 65 years of service, and they're a credit union that specifically provides essential school banking services and an amazing tuition financing program for schools to reduce risk and administrative burden. You can check them out online, 𝐼𝐴𝑚ericaschristiancu.com/schools. That's 𝐼𝐴Mericaschristiancu.com/schools. They are amazing. You need to go check them out. And now, enjoy today's episode. Hey, school success makers. Welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater. I'm joined by a new friend out of Oakland, California, Ian Storrar, who is the CEO of 𝑡ℎ𝑒-𝑏𝑎𝑠𝑒, which is a really, really cool company that I've recently learned about. And him and I talked a couple months, or probably a couple weeks ago at this point, about what all he does. And I was like, okay, this guy has to be on the podcast because this could speak to a lot of the school leaders who are listening to this podcast. So I think you guys are going to get a lot out of this one. So stay tuned for that. But before we jump into today's episode, I do want to highlight our amazing sponsor, America's Christian Credit Union. You guys have probably heard about them before if you've been listening to the last recent episodes, but they are celebrating 65 years of service this year. And they are a credit union that provides essential school banking services and a tuition financing program for schools who are looking to reduce their risk and administrative burden, which is super cool because if you guys offer tuition, which I'm sure you do because you got to make money as a school, one of the things you guys can do as a school is instead of having to chase people for money all year round, you can have your families go get a tuition financing loan through America's Christian Credit Union, and then they can deal directly with the credit union, and you can just focus on teaching and not having to worry about collecting tuition because you will get your money up front. Super cool service, a great credit union. You can check them out online. It's 𝐼𝐴Mericaschristiancu.com/schools. That's 𝐼𝐴Mericaschristiancu.com/schools. Well, as we jump into today's episode, I don't want to take any more away from Ian, so I'm actually going to pass it off to him to introduce himself. So Ian, welcome to the podcast today, sir.
Thank you, Mitchell. It's great to be here. And I just want to add that we're fans of ACCU. I know they're a longtime sponsor of the podcast, and they're doing great work and serving a lot of the same organizations that we're both engaged with between your podcast and this space. So really glad to be here. And that's kind of how we connected in the first place. It's a wonderful thing to all be kind of helping each other out.
I love it. It's like a big, huge, happy family.
Exactly.
So I always start off the podcast with my same basic question, which is if I was to come to visit in Oakland, California, what would you be like? Mitchell, you got to do this to have the full Oakland experience.
Oh, there's so many things. Oakland's a great town. You know, you and I were talking about this before we started recording about Oakland. People have this sense of Oakland from maybe the movies or TV or the news, but it's a really fantastic city, really diverse. You've got the flatlands, you've got the hills, you've got Lake Merritt downtown. Chinatown is a great place to go and visit and eat some great food, the Oakland Zoo. And of course, there's a lot of great communities and neighborhoods within Oakland. It's a big city, relatively speaking, about 400,000 people, I believe, just with a real diversity and a lot of different places where you can go and find connection, whether it's through churches or schools or some of the community organizations that are doing great work all over the place. So I would say come and check out Lake Merritt, start from there and start fanning out, check out the food. There's a great food scene, which I love, some great barbecue and other things that may not be associated with California so much, but there's obviously a great community of foodies here that are bringing some of the food out that's really born in Oakland, but maybe influenced by the South and other parts of the country.
I love it. Well, I know California is a beautiful state. I've visited it multiple times, and I do love that there's mountains and beach, and you can get snow and beach, all that stuff in the same day. It's absolutely beautiful. The rocks into the beach, my favorite area. is San Luis Obispo. It's probably one of our favorite areas to go to in California. It's just
we had a great
beautiful
vacation there a couple of years ago, and it was just beautiful. If you get down there, go check out, I think it's Pismo Beach, and there's a great farm near there that has incredible food. Again, food is a big motivating factor for me.
I love me some food. Well, as we kind of dive in, I would love to just have you talk about this space for a little bit before I dive into kind of the three main questions I go through. Obviously, when we talked first, I heard about what you're offering, and full disclosure, everybody who's listening, Frank, who works at ACCU, that we're a sponsor, he's become a really good friend of mine, and him and I were talking about ideas like how can we serve schools better, and the idea of what Ian does at this space was one we came up with, and we're like, oh man, we found some people that are already doing it before we knew about what he is and what he does. And so we're like, well, now I have to have him on the podcast because he's doing a business that is, I think, such a vital piece of that what churches and schools could use and need. So setting you up really good here, Ian. So I'll pass it off to you to tell people what is this space.
All right, let me give you what it is, and then maybe I'll tell you a little bit about how we came to be as well, because I think it's an important part of the story. So this space is a marketplace to help churches and other faith-based organizations share their space with the community. And we do that through a relatively straightforward system where you sign up, you become a host on this space, you can list the spaces that you have and make them available to people who come, and they might want to host a community yoga class or a concert or some kind of celebration, or they have all sorts of different uses. We've had scout troops and nonprofits and other organizations renting from churches in our community here in the Bay Area. And that allows those churches or other institutions to generate a little bit of extra rental income. But just as importantly, it's about serving the community and stewarding those resources, that asset that they have. If they own and operate their own facility, they can then make that available to other people and open their doors to the people around them. So I think it's a real mission for us and for the hosts that we work with so far to kind of rethink the way that space is used. And I think that's fundamental. Going back to the origin of the company, I was sitting on the board of my local church just before the pandemic, thinking about the fact that we had all this space that we built in generations and decades prior to serve a community that has changed a lot over that time. And so we're looking around and we have all this space available, but it's not really being used. And at the same time, there are financial challenges and strains on the congregation, on the institution. But we also want to increase our mission and outreach to the community and really engage people, especially people that are coming into the community that weren't there before. There's kind of a changing of the guard, if you will, as families move in and others move out and people's lives move on. And so we were trying to figure out, well, how do we solve these various problems? And it hit me that rather than trying to solve it as a board member on a single board in a single church, we should do this as a network. And so that was the genesis of this space. I talked to my pastor and some of the sort of the elders, if you will, of the congregation. It's an Episcopal church, so those terms are a little bit different in that denomination, but it just made sense to everybody. And so I had the great plan of launching in March 2020. Of course, the pandemic hit, everything went into lockdown. Opening doors to the community was not really on the cards at that point, but fast forward to today, we're now working with 15 congregations in the East Bay and expanding as we speak to serve more and more. And so the vision is to create this network that will be national and maybe eventually international to connect all of these spaces that are stewarded by congregations, by schools, by community centers, primarily with a faith background, because I think there's a real need there to rethink the model of the way that faith spaces are managed and accessed, as the way that people come together in those spaces on a Sunday morning or at other times of the week is evolving, as we've seen in the last few years. So that's the vision, and we're kind of early on the journey, but been working on it for a little while now, and I've been working with the team on it full time for the last year.
Love it. And then could this then, Ian, to be for, let's say, a church or a school owns a building, but they don't use it on Sundays? Could a church then find them on there and contact them to say, hey, can we rent your school out to run a church service on a Sunday? And then vice versa. If a church had one, but a school's like, hey, can we rent out the facility for the week? Is more so for that?
I think all of these things are possible, and we're starting early with some very simple, basic things. If you need a space for an hour or a few hours, that's kind of the way that we're addressing the need for the moment. But as we get larger and we find more and more opportunities, we'll be expanding and evolving the model. So right now, there are churches all over the country that, whether they have their own preschool or they rent some of their facilities out to a separate preschool, they're doing that already. And we've got conversations and activities like that happening already with some of the churches that we work with. And then vice versa, as you said, you might have a school that just, they're not meeting on a Sunday or even a Saturday. And so there's an opportunity for them to steward that space and to make it available for different purposes. And they get to choose how and who they rent to and how they open their doors. But that is the vision. And I think the fundamental thing is we just have to, my dad's a minister. I grew up in churches. I've been on multiple church boards over the years as a grown up. And we just got to get innovative, and we're going to change the way we think of these facilities. And this is a change that comes around every so often, whether it's every 150 years or every 500 years. We've got a lot of history to look back on, but I think we are at the point where this change is happening. We have a chance to shape it and to be more in control of the future by building tools that are fit for purpose. So I would just encourage people to think about how we can be more creative and more innovative and be sort of in charge of our destiny when we think about how we use our space and how we make sure that we have the resources and the processes in place to be around in whether it's 5 years or 50 years in the way that we choose to be.
And I 100% agree with that. So all the listeners listening right now, think about what building you're in right now, whether you own that building or you're renting that building. Let's picture if you're one of the schools who does own your facility. Is there empty space? Is there rooms that you're not using on certain days that you could look at, renting out on a Sunday to a church that's wanting to start, or a preschool that needs it, or a camp? Maybe you have your fields at the school that you're not using and you can rent out the field. Obviously this space is growing, and they're just in the Bay Area, but we want them to grow nationally to be able to service everybody. But even just in the here and now, is there something you're not tapping into that can make you another few $100 or $1,000 a month to add to your school? There's so much opportunity in this space that I don't think people have looked at or maybe even thought of fully, or they don't know where to start too. And I feel like that's another piece. They go, oh yeah, I have this room, but then what do I do? How do I manage the insurance? How do I manage the cleaning? And I know that's obviously what you guys kind of come in to help manage that side of it, correct?
Exactly. That's kind of the stuff that shouldn't be on the shoulders of principal or an administrator or a pastor or whoever's, a board member, a volunteer. They should be focusing on education, on mission ministry, on getting the bulletin printed for Sunday or getting the newsletter out to the parents. Whatever the thing is that needs to be done is not worrying about these things. And that's why we have to do this as a network as opposed to putting it on the shoulders of the individuals, because it doesn't differentiate for them to make sure that insurance is in place. It needs to happen, but it shouldn't be their biggest concern on a daily basis or even a weekly or monthly basis. It just needs to be kind of taken care of, and then they can, if they're meeting with a board or others, say, yep, we got that taken care of. So that's a fundamental. And I would say it's, there's an opportunity here. We're focused on existing communities that have a building. Maybe they've been there for a long time and it was built for a certain phase of their life cycle. I think there's also an opportunity to think creatively, and this might be especially relevant for the schools and the folks listening to the podcast. You could think more outside the box, if you will. What would it mean if we went and rented a space that was larger than we needed right now? Maybe we were going to grow into it eventually, or maybe we kind of want to be in this location, but the only thing available is a former big box store, and we want to go and be in that community, but we don't need all that space, or we won't need it every day or in the evenings or things like that. You can start to be creative, and there's a bunch of people thinking about this. There's a pastor called 𝑚𝑎𝑟k 𝐸𝐴𝑠 who wrote a book about the coming revolution of church economics, which was very influential to me along the way, thinking about how do you take a big space and divide it and think about, okay, we need the school over here, but over here is going to be a coffee shop and back there is going to be a gym. And that creates an economic model for your mission, but you don't have to be the sole, leaseholder. If you're leasing a space, or if you're buying it, you can finance it because you're going to have more of a reliable income stream with those other mixed use purposes. So there's all sorts of approaches here. This space is trying to solve what we think is a really important and big opportunity for the communities and the congregations that we're serving, but it's by no means the only approach. In other cases, we're part of an ecosystem where, there are organizations, consultants, developers, denominations thinking about how do we take a facility or a piece of land and turn it into affordable housing. And maybe it has a unit on the ground floor that is available for the congregation that once, took that entire lot and had a great big, 10,000 square foot sanctuary or something. Those things are changing, and there's a whole bunch of different options. I think what people need to keep in mind is that they have options, and fundamentally they're not on their own to figure it out. So whether it's coming to work with this space or going to the good folks in the various organizations that I'm connected to, we all get together. We have a Slack channel and have meetings and conferences and things. There's this growing movement of people who are thinking differently about what the future of churches, schools, community means, and it's not going back to the 50s.
And if there's somebody listening, like let's say they're not in the Bay Area, do you still want them to reach out and talk about like what it would look like to add their church, their school into the ecosystem?
Yeah,
or how so what's the best way to get in contact with you? Because I want to make sure we don't throw off your growth too. If you're like, well, now we have somebody in Iowa and now we're in Georgia, but we're in like random places, like what your goal is. But I want to make sure people.
My dream is to get to the Quad Cities, but we're currently working on expansion and working with partners to move into Colorado and North Carolina, to Canada, Chicago, New York. We are working to do that. So if somebody's interested, my email is ian@thespace.io. Just shoot me an email and I'm happy to discuss. We're working with all sorts of different organizations to figure out how do we scale this. I think this needs to happen now, and we're keen to grow as fast as we can in a responsible way with partners to solve the need, because there are so many places where it's a real struggle and people feel like they're walking on their own. And I think we want to walk alongside them and help them figure out what the right thing is. And if we're not the right answer, we'll be clear about that, and we'll figure out how we can connect people to the right solution for their particular problem or their particular need. But yeah, I guess I'm sure you have millions of listeners. Maybe not millions, but I'm happy to hear from anybody. If I get overwhelmed, I'll be as fast as I can in getting back to you. And we may not get to Des Moines as fast as we would like, but it can't hurt to start identifying where the need is and figure out how we get there together.
Love it. Well, I know I typically ask the 3 questions which we talked about, I know beforehand. So we'll dive into that and see. I know some of these we've probably already answered, but for like the challenges space, like where have you kind of seen the people you're working with, specifically if we have enough to go off of for the school sector, of like, where have you seen the challenges and how are these schools combating the challenges when it comes to their space and renting it out and renting a space?
I think it's about being really clear on what kind of use you're looking for and identifying, you might have a school that is focused on, say, the arts, and you have, or it could be that you have a real emphasis on athletics and you have some great sort of, sports facilities or other kind of programming that means that you're going to be a great partner to other organizations in that field. So it's not about being all things to all people. It's about figuring out what is our mission and how do we make sure that we're serving that by stewarding the resources. If you have extra space, or if you are looking for a place to go, how can we help you find a place that's going to be the right environment for you to flourish? Because we don't want to just have a series of siloed tenants and landlords. What we want is to build some community where there are sort of opportunities to build on the mission together. And so that's kind of where we've been focusing on how we help the hosts that we have identify those goals, mission aligned activities, and bring those together. That would be the first thing I would say.
Okay. And then on the site itself, like that's where you're helping to connect both. So like the let's say the churches are like advertising space, and you're helping to get people in to find that space as well. So like you're in a kind of in a almost a double-edged sword here, because you're trying to advertise for the spaces, but also trying to get the spaces. Is that kind of how the ecosystem works?
Yeah. And so we're trying to build intentional relationships on both sides of that marketplace essentially, and bring the right people together. I was just on a call yesterday with somebody in Raleigh, North Carolina, talking about this, and there's such an opportunity to, and that was on the more on the guest side. We talk about hosts and guests, so the organizations that are looking for space, we want to make sure that we're serving the needs and helping them find the resources they need to expand and to continue their programming. And one of those resources is funding. The host needs funding, the guest needs funding to pay for the space. There's kind of this ecosystem that we're trying to develop a model for and bring everyone together in the right way. And what we can do is come along and provide some rails that you can write on in terms of the managing the interaction, the transaction, the collecting insurance information, payment, and those kinds of things to make that the sort of least of your concerns. And then it's about finding the right fit for all parties.
Perfect. Well, talking about challenges, now what's going really good? Have you have any cool success stories of a school, if there's any that are in the school space that have just had some really cool success stories from using this space?
So we have not had any, we don't have any school hosts. I'll be clear about that. We do have hosts that have preschools in them. And so we're currently, whether it's after school programs, those are probably the closest for the most part. We have some great examples of after school programs being run in these churches. In some cases, we have schools that are looking to expand and they need to run some additional programming, but they don't have the capacity in the facility they're in. And so they can use a church as a sort of overflow or a flex space. So we have some of our hosts are doing that with a middle school, for example, or a sort of daycare extension, moving from actually sharing space between two different hosts is a conversation we're having in one place right now. They're across the street from each other, different organizations, but it just makes sense to kind of help bring those two together. I personally have experience of working with preschools and bringing those into churches, and I can see that there's kind of everyone's kind of on their own, and everyone's trying to figure out how do we do this. It's not a big market. Commercial brokers aren't interested generally if it's not an entire facility, and so I think it's about making sure that the kind of expectations are set clearly, that we keep this simple, that we build trust between the partners, and that when it comes to the commercial arrangements, it works for everybody. The school needs to have the ability to pay its teachers a living wage and to make sure that it can provide all the resources it needs to its students. The host church also needs to have the capacity to maintain that facility and to keep operating in that community for the long haul, so that school can then have the sort of confidence it can continue to serve the parents and the children that it's serving.
Love it, man. I really do love this, and I'm hoping you guys are able to grow fast across the country because it's something that's needed. And again, I think it's something that people have probably, even certain schools that are listening, have thought of, but like, well, how do we do that? Because it's just another thing they have to think about. And I'm hoping, again, it can spread to their area where they can roll it out. Because I mean, in my head, Ian, I don't know if this is how it would work, because this is obviously your space, not mine, is like if let's say a random school or church or anything in a city you're not in yet wanted to just use this space, could they technically use this space and then advertise themselves to their area and say, "Oh, we rent it out, but we use this space as the way to do that"?
Anybody, we haven't really pushed that before, but anybody can do that. You can sign up, and we would, there's an approval process. We don't want anybody to just show up and start advertising space or listing space that's not appropriate. But you can just create an account and start setting yourself up today if you want to. It's simple. There's no fees. It's designed to be simple and turnkey as much as possible, but we just add a little bit more kind of assurance and the hand holding along the way. And then just a side note, we only make money when our hosts make money. So when a booking takes place, we take a percentage of that. So that's kind of the model, and it's intentional because we feel like we should be succeeding together. We're not here to extract money from these entities up front. But I was going to say something. It's gone. Oh, so yeah, you can sign up wherever you are, and then that might be a way for us to start expanding. If you are in Des Moines, Iowa, and you want this to exist, let us know, and maybe that is the reason that we come there. We're focusing on where the demand is and where people are reaching out to us, and we're building those partnerships. So if you are in Athens, Georgia, and you have 2 or 3 schools and that you're connected to, even if you're not all part of the same organization, or 2 or 3 campuses maybe there's an opportunity for us to help you there. And the model that we're developing is evolving as well. So it may be that what you are looking for, or you have kind of a specific feature that you think you need. That's something that, we're interested in understanding so that we continue to meet the needs of the community. We started as simple as possible, and we really have the minimum viable product is the sort of the term in the industry. That doesn't mean that we have everything solved and that we know how to serve the needs of schools. I'm sure there are multiple different categories as well, depending on, if you're multi-site or you're renting space versus you own your own facility or whatever it might be. There's all sorts of different things that we'll have to start to figure out over time.
Got it. Love it. Well, as we kind of look to close it out, wrap it up, I always ask the same, question to end it out is if you could share a piece of advice with any of the school leaders that are listening to the podcast today, what would that piece of advice be?
The piece of advice I think it's the most important for people to think about is taking yourself out of what is and why things can't work, and think about what could you do if you changed the way that you operated. So if you think differently about the facilities that you may have and the opportunity to serve your mission, to serve your students, your families, your community, that might open up new ideas, new possibilities, and it might give you new ways of fulfilling your mission that you hadn't thought of when you were constrained by the way that things have always been. So just think about what could be. And yes, there are all sorts of issues that we need to work through, whether it's risk, insurance, liability, taxes, etc. Those are all things that we deal with every day. And when we talk to people, we work through, but those should not be the things that stop you from thinking about what could be.
Love it. Well, Ian, I love our chat today. I love what you're doing. So again, if anybody's listening, if you want to reach out to Ian, it's ian@thisspace.io. If you guys want to reach out to him, or go to his website, thisspace.io, to check out what they're doing. Look at what other listings look like in the Bay Area. It's really cool, and I'm looking for it to spread across the country. And hopefully your school will be on it, or whoever's listening, you guys can use it in some capacity, because I really do think it is a really cool company that is serving and helping a lot of people. So Ian, I appreciate your time today and wishing you nothing but the best as you continue to do what you're doing, man.
Thanks, Mitchell. Take care.
Well, another huge shout out and a thank you to Ian for taking time and being on the podcast today. I love what he's doing over at This Space, and I encourage you guys to go check it out, thisSpace.io, or please email him, ian@thisSpace.io, to check out what they're doing. And if you have a building available to be able to put on there, or maybe you're looking for a building, it's something that's growing. Of course, they're in the Bay Area at the moment, but they are looking for locations all across the country. So go get connected over there with him. And another big shout out, of course, to our sponsors, America's Christian Credit Union. You can find them online, americaschristiancu.com/schools. That's americaschristiancu.com/schools. We love that you guys are joining us every week on the podcast. We want you to get connected with us. We do have a private Facebook group just for school leaders like yourself. So go over to Facebook, go School Success Makers, and find the private group and join us in there. I'm personally in there. I'd love to personally see you in there as well. Use it to ask questions, connect with other school leaders across the country. It has your space to be in, so please join over there. Please check us out online as well, schoolsuccessmakers.com. That's schoolsuccessmakers.com. We have some great resources on there that are also going to be growing, and there's going to be more stuff coming out. We're launching a newsletter called the School Success Report. We want you to sign up for that. It's going to be really sweet. I believe we're launching that this fall officially, but you can go ahead and get your name on the list to be able to start getting that. Some really cool stuff coming down the pipeline. So make sure you stay connected with us. Come back every week for new episodes. But I love you guys. So I appreciate you taking time out of your day to listen to the podcast. If you haven't yet, we love you to smash that 5-star review for us, because it helps us be able to put out more content for you, because it does take a lot of time, money, and resources to put these out. But we, of course, love you, school leaders, so we want to make sure we're able to do that for you. Any feedback, comments, questions, concerns, or ideas, you can find it or reach out to us with those online on our website. And I look forward to getting connected with you and meeting you soon. And if your school is struggling in any capacity for filling up seats for this fall, growing enrollment, please reach out to us, because we can help you do that and take care of those problems as well. Whew, I think that's it, guys. So we'll be here next week with another awesome guest as usual on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then.